Welcome back to Two Keto Dudes. This is Carl Franklin from Connecticut in the United States. And in February 2016, I put myself on a ketogenic diet to take control of my metabolism. In just 2.5 months, I managed to reverse all my markers of type 2 diabetes with diet alone. As of now, I'm 80 pounds lighter with no signs of diabetes or heart disease.
Hi, I'm Richard Morris in Canberra, Australia. I've been on a ketogenic diet since April of 2014, and when I started, I was very sick with complications from type 2 diabetes. And within 6 months of starting a ketogenic diet, all of my biomarkers of disease had disappeared. I usually say that I've lost about 100 pounds. In fact, I lost exactly 46 kilograms, which is 101.2 pounds-ish.
Awesome.
And I completely turned my health around.
And this show is a document of our experiences thriving for years in ketosis.
Yeah, and reversing the progress of diabetes.
And hopefully that might help a few people who are curious about this kind of dietary hacking.
We're not doctors, we don't want to give any medical advice, but we are keen to share our own experiences. We're actually both software developers, so we're not afraid of a little technical detail, are we, Carl?
You got it, Jack.
We've done some research into our own deranged metabolisms and the science behind them, and we share the studies that we've found in the show notes.
And you'll probably work out pretty quickly that we're both foodies.
Oh, yeah.
We love to cook and we love to eat.
Mm-hmm.
In every episode, we both share a keto recipe that you might like. So I'm sure you do. Mm-hmm. Let's start podcast number 143, Any Way You Can, with Dr. Annette Bosworth.
Heard you say you're due for a little.
So, Richard, do we have any apologies or corrections from last week's show?
Last week was 142. Professor Jake Kushner, pediatric endocrinologist. No, Jake was perfectly prepared and delivered a wonderful interview. I'm not sure about me, however. I tend to have a problem in these interviews. I apologise for the fact that both in that interview and in Stephen Finney's interview, I kept on going, yep, all the time. Even I found that annoying, so my apologies.
Well, when you're in the presence of greatness, sometimes, things just come out of your mouth that we're
not
what?
worthy, we're not worthy.
No
I might have said that a few times.
All right, well, let's revisit what a ketogenic diet is.
Sure. It's one that puts you into a state of ketosis, and that basically means that you're using fat for energy rather than glucose.
Yeah.
And the way that you do that is you just don't eat any glucose.
Right.
Where does glucose come from? Sugar and starch. So limit yourself to 20 grams or less of sugar or starch. As far as protein goes, you're using protein to build your body. You're not using it as an energy source. So we use between 1 and 1.5 grams per kilogram of lean mass. For me, it's between 80 and 120 grams a day of protein. Mm-hmm. All of my energy I'm getting from fat.
Lovely, delicious fat. Yes.
It's a great source of energy.
It is. It's the best.
Very dense. Yeah, absolutely.
And as you're going to hear later, the brain really likes it.
It does.
So, Richard, how was your week?
It was pretty good. I did my final exam for first year. Yeah, I think I aced it. In fact, I know that I passed chemistry and aced the last exam.
Nice.
Well, the first exam, I really needed to ace because I only just passed the first exam. The first exam was on the day after Keto Fest Down Under.
Yeah.
And I didn't prepare for it. I didn't study for it as much as I did for other exams. And I got 50%, only just passed. But the final exam, I just got the marks through and I did really well in the final
All right.
exam.
So you're going to live to see another year.
Oh, I shall live to see another year. I was going to pass anyway, but I'm going to pass with honours.
With honours.
With honours. And then the biology, I did really well in biology in the final exam. So
that's great.
I think I did okay.
I always knew you were wicked smart.
Yeah, wicked smart. So how was your week, Carl?
Oh, really great. I'm doing another Kentucky Fried Chicken meetup, Keto Mini Fest here at my house on Saturday. And we're recording this on Friday. So by now, it's already happened. But the Kentucky Fried Chicken, dare I say that brand on a podcast, knockoff, the keto version of it, was so popular at the last one I did, and people kept asking me to do it again. So that's happening. Although this time, Ms. Carrie Brown is in town, as is Ms. Kim Howerton.
Nice.
They are both coming to my house. And excellent. Carrie's going to talk about what she talked about on this show, her story about dealing with depression, bipolar, and all of that. And she's bringing ice cream.
That's good.
So can't wait.
Nice.
That's it. Let's give away some swag, Richard.
Sure. Every show we pick a lucky winner at random from members of the 2 Keto Dudes fan club.
And today we're giving away a treasure trove of stuff from vendors we like, all of which you can find at fanclub.2keto.com.
We should also mention a caveat. Most of our vendors can only ship inside the US.
That's right. But if we happen to pick someone outside the US, we will find something to send you, but probably not all the stuff.
So who's our winner this week?
Today's winner is Joseph Gross.
Congratulations, Joseph.
Yes.
Carl, let's tell everybody what Joseph's won.
Yeah, it's almost embarrassing how much stuff is heading in Joseph's direction, but we're starting with a 2 Keto Dudes coffee mug that says, "Keep calm and keto on."
Also, a signed copy of Lies My Doctor Told Me by Dr. Ken Berry online at lies.2keto.com.
And a bottle of Stevia Sweet Barbecue Sauce, developed by a barbecue restaurant owner who plans to change the restaurant industry forever. Only 2 carbs per serving online at steviasweetbbq.com.
And a cheese-making kit from Wine and Way. Pan Zorn gave everybody at Keto Fest a kit so that they could make their own fresh mozzarella. It's available online at wineandway.com. That's wineandwhey.com.
Oh, now you got me thinking of the burrata she made in Breckenridge. Oh my God, that was so good.
She made it at Keto Fest as well. It was really good. Yeah.
And yeah, I guess you can use it in that kit so long as you use cream instead of milk, right?
Well, you actually make cultured butter. You make a ball of cultured butter and then you wrap hot, fresh mozzarella around it and shape the ball around it. That's what a burrata is.
Well, anyway, we digress. We're also giving away a 6-ounce cup of beef bone broth concentrate from Birthright Nutrition. Just add water, heat, stir, sip, and enjoy. Jam-packed with good stuff. More at birthrightnutrition.com.
We're also giving away a bottle of Remag Magnesium Solution developed by Dr. Carolyn Dean, along with a copy of her protocol, and the Keto and Magnesium Manifesto online at magmiracle.com.
And also a big bottle of fasting drops from Keto Chow. It's a well-formulated blend of electrolytes. You just drop a little in your water and fasting will be a breeze. Online at fastingdrops.2keto.com. By the way, I am 2 days fasted as we speak.
I love fasting drops. I think they're awesome.
Yeah.
It's a really nice form of salt. So
it is.
Yeah, I highly recommend this product. That's not an endorsement. I just think they're awesome. We're also giving away 2 bottles of Sated. That's 1 chocolate, 1 vanilla, online at sated.2keto.com.
And from Keto & Co., a sampler 6-pack, bag of brownies, 4 bags of different flavor cauliflower rices, and a bag of flatbread, online at ketoand.co.
I had some of their flatbread. I got like a dozen packets from Keto Fest. And they're awesome. They're really good.
It is good.
And finally, we're giving away a bag of everything bagels from Fox Hill Kitchens. That's made with yeast, but no wheat or gluten. That's available online at bread.2keto.com. And this is the bread that was used to make the
grilled cheese sandwiches. Yeah.
Grilled cheese sandwiches at Keto Fest. So it's otherwise known as Julie Bagels.
Julie Bagels, yeah. And Julie is coming down from Vermont for tomorrow, and she's bringing some chicken liver pate to put on top of her toasted bread. It's just, that's going to be a great appy. Well, anyway, if you don't want to wait to win some swag, you can buy all sorts of it online at gear.2keto.com, which lands us squarely in the realm of mail. Oh. Mail.
Mail. Short, sweet, to the point.
I'm sorry.
What you got, Carl?
Okay, well, mine is from the great big keto before and after thread on our forum, which you can get to at success.2keto.com. This is from Grant McDonald, and his before and after picture is nothing short of remarkable. He says, yesterday, November 14th, was my first year ketoversary. Thus far, I have lost 144 pounds.
Nice.
Well done, Grant. He says, I thank the Lord for leading me to the 2 Keto Dudes. When I started, I couldn't even walk home, a 7-minute walk, without stopping to rest. Since November 14th, I have walked 3
million.
Jeez, I have to read this again. This is a huge number. Since November 14, I have walked 3,364,717 steps, or 2,200.6 kilometers.
Wow.
Oh my.
Wow.
I loved walking, but I could no longer do it. My prayer was to finally get back to a place where I would love walking again. Done. The before picture was me a couple years ago. I was not at my heaviest and could still walk quite a distance. The after picture was me in October, and I have lost more weight since then. I can't wait to see what the next year brings, and keto is a way of life for me, not a diet.
Yep.
Thanks to Carl and Richard for being such a tremendous inspiration.
Yeah, you're welcome, Grant.
Yeah, well done. Well, you know, this thread just never ceases to amaze me, and it's public. You can just share the link, success.2keto.com, with anyone for inspiration. What do you got, Richard?
So mine is actually a mail that I sent.
Okay.
So a year ago, I had a great conversation with Dr. David Ludwig. He is a Harvard researcher and endocrinologist who was doing a sabbatical in Sydney, working with Jenny Brand Miller at Sydney University. And he did a paper many years ago. It was a study where he tested a low-carb diet versus a high-carb diet, and he was able to find an advantage for the low-carb diet. But the problem was he was using Atkins diets. He was using a diet out of a book, and he was trying to be faithful to the diet in the book. And so the two different diets, the high-carb and the low-carb diet, had different amounts of protein. And so even though the low-carb diet showed that people lost more weight on a low-carb diet, it was open to the accusation that there were different levels of protein, and because the low-carb diet had less protein, that it was a confound.
Right.
And so for many years, people have said, this doesn't show that calories in, calories out doesn't work because, there's a confound because there's different amounts of protein. And everybody knows that protein is the most important macronutrient.
Yeah.
So anyway, long story short, we had a great conversation. We were talking about this. This was on International Diabetes Day. Well, flash forward 12 months, and Dr. Ludwig has just released a new study. And this was actually funded by Gary Taubes and Nusi.
Oh.
And you might remember Gary Taubes, when we interviewed him, he said that there is a study on its way coming out that should be interesting, but he didn't want to give away the details. Well, this is David Ludwig's study. And this was the title of the study is Effects of a Low-Carbohydrate Diet on Energy Expenditure During Weight Loss Maintenance Randomized Trial.
Interesting.
So what he did was he took 164 adults aged between 18 and 65 years with a BMI of 25 or more. So they were overweight people. So 164 adult overweight people.
Okay.
So what they did with this study was they got these people to lose 12% of their body weight, 12% weight loss, within plus or minus 2%. And this was called a run-in diet. So it's basically calorie restricted. These people were in a metabolic ward, so the only food that they could eat was the food that they were given. And once they had all lost 12% of body weight, their participants were randomly assigned to one of 3 test diets according to carbohydrate content. Now, remember, protein was consistent across all of these diets. So nobody could say, this is just you're just observing a difference in protein. These people all getting the same amount of protein. And the 3 diets were a high carbohydrate diet, which was 60% of energy from carbohydrate, a moderate carbohydrate diet, which is 40% of energy from carbohydrate, or a low carbohydrate diet, which is 20% of energy from carbohydrates. Now, none of these are ketogenic. This is just how do people differ in their fundamental measurements when they're eating a high carb, moderate carb, or lowish carb diet for 20 weeks. And these test diets were controlled for protein, as I said, so that the protein was consistent across all 3 diets.
Okay.
And they were energy matched to maintain a weight loss within 2 kilograms. So if you were losing weight, you were given more food, given more calories in the proportion of the calories that your diet was assigned to you. And so they were trying to work out what their engines would run like based on these different amount of carbohydrate.
Right.
The results of this were 52 kilocalories per day extra energy burned for every 10% decrease in the amount of carbohydrates to their total energy intake.
There you go.
So here's the thing. The less carbs you eat, the more energy you burn.
Or the higher your calories out.
The higher your calories out, exactly. Your calories out change based on what you eat, which is what we've been saying from the beginning.
So you could rebrand it carb calories in, lower calories out.
Exactly. So the total energy expenditure for the people on the high carb diet, and this is 60% of calories were from carbohydrates, their total energy expenditure during the day was 2,915 kilocalories per day. The people in the intermediate diet, this is moderate, 40% of energy from carbohydrates, were 30-30. So they were almost another 100 kilocalories per day extra energy that they were burning. Now remember, they were all losing weight at exactly the same gradient.
Interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
That is fascinating.
And so these people were burning more energy. And then the people who are on the very low carbohydrate diet, well, they were 3,110 kilocalories per day. Now, people on a ketogenic diet are at like 5% of calories. So you can add probably an extra 75 kilocalories a day on top of the low carb amount.
Wow.
So anyway, the male is a mail that I sent to Dr. Ludwig congratulating him for a wonderful study, and I'm looking forward to citing it in my own research one day.
Wow, that's fantastic.
That's my mail for the day.
Awesome. That is fantastic. We just ought to have another segment called Richard on Science. I'm totally serious. Anyway.
Well, I'm actually going to do a video series where I debunk science. So
I can't wait for that, man.
That's something I'm planning to do for next year, yeah.
Can't wait.
Mm-hmm. All that science is making me want to hear from a real doctor.
Yeah, let's bring Dr. Bosworth on. Well, it is my great privilege to introduce Dr. Annette Bosworth, and she is an internist, an internal medicine doctor, and has spent many years of her life thinking about how to heal root causes of her patients, and that has led her ultimately to the ketogenic diet. She wrote a book about, a lot of things, but the main character was her mother, who was suffering from a very aggressive form of cancer, and she was able to bring her back from the brink with that. She's also helping numerous people in the keto world and with addictions and with all sorts of things. She's just Brandon, who edits this show, Brandon Wen, calls her House.
It was one of our guests.
Yes, calls her House. She's like Dr. House. So welcome, Annette.
Well, it is an incredible honor to be on the show. Thank you for inviting me. And I feel like I'm with a couple of stars.
Oh, likewise.
No, we're the ones who feel grateful.
Absolutely. You're the rock star here, as far as we're concerned.
Mm-hmm.
I think you did a great job of explaining internal medicine. One of the problems with our specialty is nobody knows what that means.
Yeah.
You say, I'm an internal medicine doctor. And they're like, huh. Like my eyes kind of gloss over.
There's external medicine?
Yeah, it seems very general. So in other words, you don't do skin?
Right. Yeah. I think a better term, like we need a marketing campaign because one of the, when you're in your training, you have these professors that are like incredibly knowledgeable and they give you quarterly reports. And my favorite report that I got probably in my second year of residency was, well, you sure have a lot of personality for this specialty.
Oh. Oh.
And I thought, oh, yeah, it is about a lot of cerebral, very intelligent people. And
can you try to be a little more dull? That would be great.
Right, exactly. There's my problem. It's been recurring for years.
Well, and you're very outspoken, too. You're not just a doctor, but you're an activist who has 12 felonies for your activism.
Which are removed.
How did that happen?
Yeah, what's that all about?
A 12-time felon. Like, that's like, I don't take it to the edge and get one felony. I got 12.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did that happen? Yeah, I didn't back down when it got scary, I suppose. So I'm an internist and I have been serving patients for over 20 years. And again, we take care of the long game, the chronic illnesses.
Right.
And one of the places that I served for, it has been the underserved in my community. And I live in South Dakota. We have 4 of the top 10 poorest counties in the country. And there's lots of brown skin on those counties.
Yeah.
So while I was taking care of kids in my shelter, They were teenagers, and I also do a lot of mission work, and these teenagers were eating kitty litter.
Oh, my.
Yeah, the ashes off of the top of matchsticks. Oh, yeah. One girl was like, she thought she was crazy because she'd go into the bathroom and she'd eat toilet paper. And I'm like, uh-oh, I know this. And anyway, longer story is this is pica syndrome. This is, if you ever had a woman at the end of pregnancy who's just chewing on ice, and she is not getting any nutrition out of that ice. It's just ice. But that's a syndrome where you crave things, and they don't have to have a nutritional substance in them. They just crave things. And in third world countries, they have bread made out of clay or dirt. And again, same problem. They're very low on iron. They're very malnourished. But one of the things that the low carb conference, the first one I ever studied diligently, talked about this dual burden, which is obesity and malnourishment.
Yeah.
And boy, the folks in my shelter had this. And there's an incredibly sad story that leads to 12 felonies. So this does go somewhere. The young girl was 13, has had a mom who's been in prison due to addiction. The family unit is apart, and she's been sitting in her timeout chair in the shelter for over 2 weeks. And when I ask, I know it's awful. And I asked the counselor, what's wrong with her? And the counselor says, oh, she's being stubborn. She won't do her homework. And I'm like, oh, I know stubborn, and dang, that is not stubborn. So she's owned by the state at this point. So it takes 10 days to get the paperwork. I'm like, let me see her. And she's the girl who whispered, I think I'm crazy.
Oh.
And she was the one who would go into the bathroom and eat toilet paper. And I said, I don't think you're crazy, honey. Let me check some labs. And ferritin, you guys have talked about ferritin, is this little protein or this molecule that carries around iron.
Yeah.
And if you get it below 30, you're kind of low. It's hard to repair a brain when that ferritin is below 30. We love it above 50. If you get below 20 and you want a kidney transplant, I've got to give you some iron in the vein to get that iron up, because it means ferritin is like the bus that carries iron around.
Yeah, it's how we sequester it away from bacteria, right?
Yeah, and it's also how we transport it from the liver or from the bone marrow, from the liver to the bone marrow to get your red blood cells made with really nice hemoglobin so it can carry good oxygen.
Yeah.
So her ferritin was less than 4.
Oh, my.
And I said, oh, the lab must be wrong. Let me do that again. Nope, it was less than 4. And so I did the first, smart thing, which was buy them liver.
Yeah,
you
right.
can say not so smart thing. They're teenagers in a shelter.
That must have gone over really well.
Yeah,
Could
right.
at least done some Braunschweiger.
We're from South Dakota. We have that in our convenience stores here.
Right.
Of course you do.
Yeah. We failed. So then I moved on to doing something that had never been done in South Dakota, which was, here these kids are I tested all of them, and we had an abundance of this really low iron. And they were all coming from reservations where, again, this dual burdency of obesity and malnourishment. Anyway, this started a fight with the government because I ordered something that hadn't been done or approved in my state, but had been done medically, which is, do what I do with a kidney transplant patient and just give them the iron in the vein.
Yeah.
And, they do this to premature babies. This is a safe thing to do, especially when it's that low.
Yeah. So wait a minute. So somebody filed an objection and you found yourself in jail? What's the dirt, man?
The dirt it's so messy. They said, this is Cadillac medicine. And I would just get sticky notes warning me, this is Cadillac medicine.
What do they mean by that?
I didn't know either, but about the third sticky note, I'm getting the message. This is coming from the state government. This wasn't a filing. It was this was naughty. Anyway, so I said, forget it. I'll pay for the iron. It's not that expensive. I mean, it's $300 a kid, and you can't believe the transition. I mean, I gave that gal after trying the liver, and we finally gave her IV iron. And I walked in the next week. I'd given it to her on a Friday. I saw her on a Tuesday. And from across the room, she says, Dr. Bosworth. And I just got goosebumps because it was her brain was awakening.
Right.
And I'm like, within a week, her homework was done. It's just an incredible story of what happens when malnourishment is chronic. And that's what internal medicine does, is we take care of long-term problems like heart disease and blood pressure and cholesterol and cancer and addiction. All of these aren't things you're going to fix in a week. This is how do we change behavior for the long game. So the 12 felonies, they come back. So I get accused of Medicaid fraud because they think that I'm getting a kickback from this iron.
Because in other words, nobody would just do that because out of their own heart. Doctors don't help people like that. She must have an ulterior motive.
Right. And when you're in a system, you know that old adage that if you want to see what somebody's insecure about, watch what they pick on other people. Like watch what they point out. So if they say, "Oh, that person gossips all the time," like,
yeah, that's the projection. That's what we do as humans. We project what we don't like about ourselves, what we want to control about ourselves onto other people. So it makes us feel bad when we do that ourselves.
So when a system is pointing out, boy, there must be something with the money.
Yeah.
I think this, the state of South Dakota.
Doff protest too much, right?
So from an accusation to a felony, that how do you get from there?
Well, so you tick off the wrong people in a system that's very stressed, very stressed system. Right. I mean, you can't help but look at America and say that the medical delivery system, especially for the underserved, is a stressed system. And if you start pointing fingers, and I wasn't shy about it, I wasn't as graceful as I could have been. I was trying to be advocating for these kids and just really didn't understand how much it was going to unsettle the leadership. So I get accused of Medicaid fraud, which means all money stops. And I'm a daughter of a miser. I was living in a normal house and I had a car and I had a lake house and a boat. Yeah, I sold all that. And before this problem gets solved, my family's living in a donated RV on 12th Street.
Wow.
For 6 months in the winter of South Dakota.
Wow.
So yeah, there's 3 kids in sleeping above the bunks of the 2 driver's seats. And that's a cold winter.
I got to ask you though, how long have you been practicing medicine? How many years?
20 years.
Okay. And when in that journey did you realize, I don't want to just give out prescriptions. I want to tackle root causes.
Yeah. I think that was there's a very analytical side to medicine that I really enjoy. And that was the core drive of what I was seeking in medicine was I'm from a small community. I believe that you're connected and responsible for that community. And you take all these oaths in medical school that say you're going to give back, you're going to teach, you're going to protect, you're going to advocate, be the advocacy. And boy, so it's been root in who I am. But I think my first 10 years in practice were in Utah, where there was a different culture. And I fit in very well. I was in, I really excelled. And then I moved back to my home state and I wanted a culture that I had been from. And essentially I didn't look around enough to say, oh, the rules are different here. So it's my own fault. I take full responsibility for all 12 felonies. When the Attorney General hears this, I take full responsibility. Do not put me back in prison. I didn't actually go to prison. I got sentenced to 24 years in prison, though.
Wow.
So here I'm living in the RV, and I get a call from Washington, D.C. saying, there's an open seat in South Dakota for the United States Senate. And my advocacy has been in many branches. I'd never touched politics before, but I was very active about saying it's important that we have good leaders and we have good policies, and my kids are in debate. I mean, we really are a family that's engaged in our community. So they fly me to Washington, D.C. They say you should run. I said, dang, I'm a first-time candidate. That's going to be a tough win. He's like, you don't need to win. You just need to run. You need to have that conversation. You're a business owner. You've had a run-in with the government. You understand what happens with a one-payer system, and you're a really good advocacy for doctors and for patients. So I actually had to sell a couch to buy the gas to drive to my own announcement.
This is awesome.
I know, the guy from the SEC, the guy, not SEC, the money of campaigns. I'm forgetting their acronym. Anyway, he says, I will tell you, Dr. Bosworth, that I have reviewed hundreds of candidates, thousands of candidates over the years, and you by far are the poorest. And I mean that financially, not in the character.
Right.
Candidate I've ever evaluated.
Yeah.
So I threw my hat in the ring. I really had fun. It was amazing to be able to talk about the issues that I was seeing behind the closed door of an exam room. I mean, this is 2013 that I'm running. The election was in 2014, and everything was about, are we going to have what happens with a one-payer system? What are the downsides? And nobody was talking about the reality of saying, if I want to give IV iron to somebody who's chewing on matchsticks, I get scolded because, nobody's done that in your area.
Right.
Who cares that science has already said this is a really good answer? It's fast. It's quick. They will have the best. That's my job as the physician.
Yeah.
Oh, but I've been scolded. I have lost all of my savings. I sold thank God I didn't have loans. I just sold house. I sold the car. I sold this, sold that, sold this.
Yeah.
Until we were empty. And then, what happens when an authentic person runs for an office? Not always, but in my case, it was incredible. I mean,
mudslinging?
No, I raised a ton of money.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So by January, which is now 6 months in, I'm truly exhausted and I have a lot of energy. But I've outraised my opponents and I'm doing it $45 at a time.
Wow.
So small campaigns. In the world of politics, you can't see who's donating when you do that.
Right.
So I have these hidden donors. And I decide I got to go fill up. This is heavy. I didn't think I was going to do this well. And now I'm nervous and exhausted. So I had been called to do another mission trip in the Philippines, which is Typhoon Yolanda had happened. And here's where the felonies come in. So Typhoon Yolanda had happened. And they said, Dr. Bosworth, you've done this so many times. Would you please bring a team? 2/3 of the population has been washed away in this. It's incredible. And of course, if I'm going to restore myself, I go to a place and serve. And especially if you can serve without having to do charting, that's even better. So here we were in the Philippines and it was amazing. And I took some of my campaign team. I took my campaign advisor with me. He had never been on this type of a trip. And we did great work. But while I was away, I left petitions in my office and had given them to some preachers and said, I need to get names I need to have people sign my petition. So my sister signed it, my staff signed it, and I felt like I was the circulator. And I didn't really understand the rules. I just knew that it was at my office and it was under my care and I knew these people. So, 90 days go by, the mission trip only happened 11 days, but this is also the time when the money comes out. So the quarter was reported for the campaign and I was number one in the clubhouse. I'd raised $760,000 or $770,000 in the 90 days. Yeah, it was impressive.
All in $45 increments, right?
Yes.
Wow.
My opponent, who is now the U.S. Senator, raised his in an average of $10,000. So he had very few donors. And then he was in the national news for using stock images in his family commercial. So it was a very embarrassing day, or difficult day. But, it's campaigns and they pick on things that you're like, oh, it sounded like a good idea at the time. I'm sure it was what happened. And but they were, pretty rough on him. And that's what happens when you're the leader. And it was the next day where I knew something was wrong because I had been going to these things called Lincoln Day dinners. And I'd walk in a room and it was like a magnet. Everybody wanted to talk to me. And something was up because I walked in the room. And every time I walked towards someone, they would walk away. Ooh. And I turned to my husband and said, something's wrong.
I'd check my deodorant if that was me.
Yeah, right? It was really scary because I'm like, this is a big game. I didn't plan on doing this well. And so in the fine print under those little signatures, now there's six petitions that were under question because they were all signed by me, but they were circulated while I was in the Philippines. And so it says in really fine print that I attest that I witnessed these signatures. And I didn't witness them. I know them. And from what I understood about the collection of petitions, first time I'd ever done it, you'd take these petitions to a basketball game, you'd pass it down and say, anybody, I want to be on the ballot, sign my petition. And that's considered safe, but it's not safe if you leave it in your medical clinic while you go on a mission trip and your staff signs it.
Oh.
So there was 30 some signatures. Only about 15 of them were used on the count. In South Dakota, you needed about 2,000 signatures. We had 3,000 legal signatures. Those are not counting the ones that so we had 1,000 extra. And the day of election, I was arrested for 6 petitions that I didn't witness the signatures.
Come on.
So that was called perjury. And then 6 felonies for filing those documents with the state of South Dakota.
You know, those 6 signatures could have made your election. Those were really important signatures. In the grand scheme of things, not really.
Right. But I think it's a very big metaphor. So here's some truths. I'm the first person in the history of the United States of America to ever be charged with, let alone found guilty of, felonious behavior of real live people signing a petition. Meaning it's supposed to be a low barrier to entrance to get you on a ballot. It's supposed to just say, yes, the community says yes. The only other person in the history of the United States to be arrested for the same crime was my husband 18 months later when he ran against the Attorney General of South Dakota, which is the same person filing the... Yeah. Anyway. Oh, man. So
he fell for the same thing.
Well, he was on the mission trip with me, and he had signed one petition that he had circulated, or he had, said, sign this. I'll grab it from you when I get back from the trip. And he did, but the voters signed the petition while we were in the Philippines. So they said, you couldn't have witnessed their signature.
Right.
Anyway, so the punchline was, when you tick off the wrong people in a very unstable environment, it's like porcelain. It may be strong, but sending a vibration through the system will crack the pot.
This is an amazing story. I got to tell you and switch gears for a minute. I've been listening to your audiobook, which is fantastic, by the way, any way you can. And
thank you.
One of the things that I was really impressed by, and I know Richard will be too, is that you went looking when you were sort of trying to figure out the ketogenic diet and is it safe? And there's so much science and there's so much clouded messaging out there. How do you find the real answer? And you went to 2 sources, which I thought was brilliant. One, you went to the U.S. government and the armed forces, because they don't have an axe to grind except that they want their soldiers to be healthy. And I'm going to let you pick up the story from here, but I thought it was just brilliant to use that as a source.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is part of the brain of being an internal medicine physician too, is leave out the personality. When I really have this drive to understand at a level that gives me the confidence to then translate what's in my mind to motivate the person in front of me. And so Department of Defense, they get the right to keep secrets in the name of our security. But at a certain time, they release those secrets. So in 2015, I started to see evidence that I'd never heard of before. Like, why would somebody who is a scuba diver be talking about something called a ketone? And what does that have to do with, how are they connected? And so
Dom D'Agostino, I think.
Yes, that's how they're connected. That is totally the man that I landed on too. And of course, he does a great job of teaching and is very committed to teaching. He speaks a language that I really love, which is, understand the science, put it on the table, and then try not to embellish. Because it is pretty fantastic when you say, wait a minute, we took these scuba divers who are wearing these really cool masks that don't allow bubbles so that nobody can see where they're diving. But the danger was if you don't go up for air, you're going to have a seizure. And seizures are pretty bad on brains. I mean, but they're really bad when you're 30 feet underwater. And their approach of using a seizure drug was just as awful as our approach has been, which is, yes, we can make the seizures less. But boy, you want to see somebody that's non-compliant. you give a Navy SEAL something that's going to slow down his reaction and decrease his mental clarity or his reaction time. Yeah, they're not going to take that medicine. So that was step one, where they were able to decrease the seizures. And then there's something you can't argue with. These Navy SEALs do things like, they're like, I grow more chest hairs than you because I can hold my breath underwater longer than you. Okay, so you can't fake that. It's not like you can skew the data. You're like, it's a second count, it's a timer. And when they could take their breath hold time to such an improved number, just by being in, and even if it was exogenous ketones, they still did an amazing improvement in their metabolism. I'm like, that's cool. I have really sick people that don't have the strength to do a ketogenic diet some days. Could I use that? And at this point, I didn't even know how to think through that.
And the idea of Navy SEALs being paid off by a drug company is ludicrous, right?
Right. They just want to perform well. And so here you have, a really good translator of the science, which was Dom D'Agostino. Very great, like clear cut. I don't think there's any wiggle room here for them to squish the numbers for me. And so then the next one was a little harder to find, but man, was so powerful to me. And that is, you go back and you start looking at ketones and you can't help but land at the Charlie Institute, which talks about kids with seizures. But if you take a history lesson back further than that, if you were unlucky enough in the 1960s to have childhood seizures and then you failed on these seizure medications, they would admit the whole family to the hospital so that the whole family would understand, how do you get this kid to be a ketone? And boy, oh boy, their seizures would decrease and they did so much better. But you had almost forced compliance for a lifetime for these patients who, if they went off the ketogenic diet, they had a seizure. So I'm in the long game. If my patients are not compliant, often it can take me years to figure out that they're not really taking the medicine the way I wanted them to. But if you're a seizure patient on a ketogenic diet, these specifically with really fragile seizures, they go off the diet, boom, they had a seizure. So what was important in my time is I was lucky enough to be seeing some of the autopsies. They were put into a study and they did one of these like unheard of things, which is, we're going to put you in a study and we want to look at your brain when you die. Okay. It's got to be funded by government because there's no way a drug company is going to wait around that long. It's just too expensive. But there was several autopsies now that look at these brains of childhood seizures. And I get to look at lots of autopsy brain pictures to learn from. And I really do have a passion for making brains work the best we know how. And I would never have envy for a brain that's had seizures. There's holes, there's scars, there's asymmetry, they're smaller, there's plaques, lots of problems, lots of chronic inflammation.
So, Annette, did you go back to the Mayo Clinic stuff in the 20s, Wilder's Mayo Clinic, when the ketogenic diet was first proposed and formulated?
So I saw a little bit about that, but that wasn't where my energy ended up. I had a great researcher who, it must have had 500 emails saying, here's the search that I found when studying the ketogenic diet. But tell me about what you're talking about there.
So in the 20s, it was discovered that a ketogenic diet was a treatment for refractory epilepsy. And it actually was a historical thing that one of the researchers was looking for stories of historical treatments for epilepsy, and one of them goes back to Roman days when, of course, Julius Caesar was a well-known epileptic, and that what they used to do was they used to fast epileptics. And I think it was Dr. Russell Wilder in 1924 at the Mayo Clinic who basically formulated this as the original formulation to treat epilepsy, and as you say, it was in the 60s. This is what happened when you had a child who was unable to be treated by drugs. And one of the things that Dr. D'Agostino found was that when he was trying to treat Navy divers, he could reduce the frequency of the epileptic seizures, but he couldn't totally prevent them. And this was something, you don't want a Navy diver who's silently swimming around landmines to all of a sudden have a seizure. And he found this work from Russell Wilder from the Mayo Clinic, and then was able to leverage that for Navy research to treat Navy SEALs.
So it reminds me now I know where I learned that. Sometimes you find a fact and you got to noodle back, where did that enter my head? So the first conference I went to when it came to like reformatting how I was going to think about my whole medical practice was Dom D'Agostino's first conference in January 2017. Everything else before this point, I'd been learning on my own, taking notes, finding a way to just teach myself what I didn't know. And this conference I went to was in Tampa Bay at the Dom D'Agostino's University of South Florida, I think. Anyway, he had a couple of, I recruited my husband, who's not a doctor. I said, Chad, I need you to go in that room and take notes from those lectures. And I'm going to go in this room and take notes from these lectures. And my husband made it like a day and a half and said, I'm going to the beach. I got you plenty of notes. But in one of those, he said, this guy from the Navy, it was doing this, and then there was a gentleman, I'm totally going to forget their names, I'm sorry. But they had done this research where, this history lesson on where did we, sometimes the things we've forgotten are the ones that have the answers. And he went through the history of the ketogenic diet and this study that you're talking about on how that's what the Navy used, that Department of Defense stuff that I had found, that was what attracted them to say, let's look closer into this. And what a cool deal.
You were telling the story about the cadavers.
Yes. So you don't get to go to a cadaver lab and have brain envy for somebody who has a diagnosis of seizures. But the cool part about the brain is when you provide an environment that is high in fat, high in the nutrients that it needs, and low in inflammation, it's amazing how well it will repair. And in a time where we have more Alzheimer's hitting our world than we've ever before, I don't know if I'd ever seen an autopsy report that didn't have an 80-year-old with neural fibril tangles, with plaques in it. And this report just kept remarking the age of this patient is in the 80s, and the pathology is so remarkable for a youthful looking cell under a microscope.
Now, these were cadavers of epileptics who'd been doing a ketogenic diet all their lives, right?
Yes. And those are the ones with the forced compliance. Like, you go off the diet, we're going to know. You're going to know.
And they had, and they also had no cancer.
Yeah, that was the other thing, is that you look at the cancer cells that anybody that has life going through them is going to have some cancer cells, but your body's built to reverse that, to address that. And, it's kind of like, how many battles do you fight today and how strong is your army is that equation for fighting cancer. And they kept remarking, we don't have any cancer cells. We can't find any cancer cells in these reports. And, they have language that's very technical and they kind of hedge, but the truth is they didn't find any. And they were, I think, a little like, that's very interesting as well.
Yeah.
And there's only a few studies, so you're not going to see a ton of these autopsies get to your front page of the medical journals, because there's only a couple. And medicine likes numbers. We like to see that 2,000 people have been helped by this. Now we can recommend it to the public.
Right.
Unlike, I'm from South Dakota, which is where George McGovern, he was our senator.
And he's the guy that sort of passed the guidelines first, right?
Oh, yeah.
He's the guy who said we don't have time to wait to be sure.
Right.
Right. He was about numbers in a different way. He had voting numbers that he was looking at. And I mean, I'm a fifth generation South Dakotan. Those are my history lessons of corn and beans is grown on every acre of this state because of that decision.
So locally, are you a heretic then? What do you mean you don't eat grain?
I'm a 12-time felon. Are you kidding me?
Well, cadavers don't lie. And how often do you get a chance to look directly at the brains of people who've spent their lives on a ketogenic diet and they're squeaky clean?
It was remarkable. It was such an amazing, I was interested in what I was hearing. But when I could find evidence like that, I canceled my clinic. That's like, I'm in private practice. That's ridiculous decision. But I'm like, I can't ethically, I can't go on until I stop the noise and understand what it is that I've either forgotten or never knew about a ketogenic diet. And it was the best investment of time ever because it not only saved my mother's life, but has changed everything about what I want to do in the next chapter of my life.
Yeah.
So our audio editor, Brandon Wen, calls you Dr. House, and he tells a fascinating story of Keto Fest this year. Apparently, he says you diagnosed him from across the room. Is there any truth to that?
Totally. I went to Keto Fest and I didn't know anyone. I knew your voices, and I think we exchanged a couple of emails before that, but and I had reached out to one of the people on this podcast who was supposed to be there. And I thought, okay, if he's coming from a different country, I'm going to I'm just going to take the time and go. And then he canceled. So I'm like, I don't know anyone here.
And you'd lost your luggage as well, hadn't you? Because I remember when we met, you came up to me and you said, I lost my luggage on the way here.
Yes, I went to a thrift shop and said, I'm going to find the cutest dress I can find, and we're going to call this a great day. Because all my money was in it. It was like awful. Anyway, but I was there and, I got to watch a lot, and I'm a very social person, but I was really intent on saying I want to absorb as much as possible. I wanted to shake hands with a few people that I had, heard about. So I got to meet Dr. Westman. I had met Jimmy Moore at that conference in South Florida, and then Daisy. I actually met Daisy there. So anyway, as I'm watching I didn't know I thought he was, kind of multiple roles happen at your conference, but so I would watch him across the room, and every time he'd turn around, I'm like, he doesn't know. But so one of the signs of a history of malnourishment is, the hair part in your scalp. So iron is important for lots of things, but if you're going to be low on iron, you're not going to grow healthy hair. And as a young man, if you can see the part of your hair from across the room, and I could measure, there's a special measurement you use to say how much alopecia do they have, how much hair loss have they had? And I'm like, he's got at least an inch of malnourishment. I mean, it's not been going on a week or a day. This is a decade of malnourishment. And it's just a goofy thing I do. It's dangerous to hang out with me too long. And so I keep watching this guy. And then at the final day, I don't fly home till the next day. And so I'm hanging out with just the people who didn't rush away. And I've made contact with Daisy, and she wants me to introduce me to Brandon. And he's super busy and he's done. Like that end of performance time. I don't want one more person to tell. And you can tell, like, I don't know if you're going to go get drunk or what you're ready to do, but you are done, man. And so I really wanted to make a connection with him, though, because I felt compelled to say, you should just eat a bunch of liver because you have such iron deficiency. Wow. So I began the conversation with, so do you know you're iron deficient, or is this news to you? And, it was a guess, but you don't do mission work in Haiti and the Philippines and not see what malnourishment looks like over and over again, to be able to your brain will file it as a pattern of how this looks to people. And I actually really wanted him to care. Yeah.
Well, I know Brandon has given us permission to talk about this, but ever since I've known him as the man with a bazillion allergies. He couldn't be in my house when we were cooking with garlic. Anything fermented. I remember taking him for sushi, and I thought everything was cool. And then just before the sushi arrived, he says, I can't have anything fermented. And I go, fermented. Rice vinegar! Oh no! Get that stuff away! This kind of thing. Like, he has a card he hands people when he goes out to dinner. But he tells me now that he's been working with you, he's been able to eat certain foods he's never been able to eat.
Yeah, he's got eggs back on the list. He's got, the list was so long. It it is a profile though. So let's just say I started the conversation with him knowing he's iron deficient. Okay. I don't need a lab to show me there's been iron. Maybe it's not going to be low on the day I checked, but it is, you do not end up with that hair pattern without a history of severe iron deficiency. And by the time we got his labs, they weren't as awful as my little folks that were in the shelter eating matchsticks, but he was low. But more importantly, when it takes the patient 15 minutes to tell you their allergies, they're not telling you their allergies. They're telling you how sick their immune system is, how fragile it is. And I did a calculation when I met him, because that was like July or something, that it's going to be Thanksgiving before this guy gets some freedom. And, you know, it's the week before Thanksgiving when we're recording this. He last week or this week said, "You can't believe the number of things I've added back to my diet." And I think that is worthy of an explanation. So you take somebody like Brandon, who is a smart guy, energetic, wants to like take charge of his life, but his brain wasn't performing in the stamina that he wanted, which was what got his attention. Like, I can only focus for these hours. And then he has this like annoying side history of all those allergies, like, "Oh, doc, I can't do this and I can't do that and I can't do this." And what my brain is doing while he's telling me this is, immune system is broken, immune system is broken, immune system is broken, immune system is broken.
Right.
You play that game forward in the long game, you're going to have cancer in your 50s. You're going to have Alzheimer's in your 60s. That is a chronic inflammatory problem. And as his physician, it's my job to figure out what gets his attention. Like, don't distract him by trying to convince him that all these allergies are going to go away. Instead, focus on what motivates him and give him one change at a time. And then the critical part that I see in chronic disease management is you need to be available for the teachable moments, which don't always happen in your office. And so you know that Brandon, he's an adventurer. I have to always start the conversation, what country are you in?
Where are you?
He's edited this show at a Starbucks in Costa Rica before.
Yay! That's so awesome. Now that is a life that needs rewarded. And to think he was going to shackle his life to figure out how to like address some of these allergy issues. I'm like, no. You keep, just like any person who's got a chronic illness, you keep living your life and let me match your journey with the educational points that I need to help you with when you're ready for them. And like any human relationship, that's not a perfect equation, but it's pretty amazing how well you can do that. In 2018 with, you know, he got his labs done. I assessed him. I've seen him in person at the Keto conference, but from that point forward in our relationship, he's helped me help him because he's in France or wherever he is, and he needed a prescription or he, had an injury. What should I do? Or a gallbladder that might not be working right. What could we do?
Yeah.
And those stories said, you know what? As we take your body because he wasn't keto at all.
No.
You guys know that, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, he was trying to reduce certain things in his diet, but he certainly ate his share of vegan crap.
Mm-hmm.
He actually became keto while he was editing the show. He was like listening to the show as he was editing it, going, "Oh, maybe I should try that," and became keto during the process.
Right. Well, and then by the time I met him, which he'd been doing this for at least a year, maybe a year and a half before I met him, he still was like, he was making up his own rules about like, I'm like, if you want to reset what you need to do to have the best brain performance, I need to nourish your brain. And that comes with this very nutrient dense diet that if you've got all those things to exclude, you don't need to teach them to me. You just need to know them. And we're going to have to start with one bite at a time on the foods that you can tolerate. And I didn't even speak about the possibility of adding them back because it would have been a fight. He was not ready to hear that.
Yeah.
And I think that's really critical for when you take somebody's hand and say, we're going to change your life one little choice at a time. They don't want to see the long game. They want to see today.
Yep.
They want to see tomorrow. And when you try to give them too much information at once, bam, you're going to lose your audience.
Yes. Yeah. It's a balancing act that we've been playing in our personal lives and on our online, and what we do here is trying not to overwhelm people with science and And that's important, but you do need to provide the links and the follow-up and some hardcore geekiness once in a while for those that like it.
Oh, and that's me. I am so attracted to this show because it's one of the first places I send my patients now.
Oh, that's so nice.
I didn't accidentally write a book that is a major story, like a story about my mom. But that's how you attract people. And you're doing the same thing with this podcast, which is your stories, which are filled with, successes and failures and honest, transparency about, okay, here's what I was told. Here's what I think. And then to watch you play it out, it's been, I love it.
And it's not over yet. That's for sure. We have more to do. I'd like you to talk a little bit about your book because I think it's a wonderful book for everyone. It's not, like you said, you're telling stories. You're using great metaphors like the pine needles versus the twigs versus the logs. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that everybody can understand. And if they want to dive into the science, that's what the internet is for. This is for you to understand what's really going on. I really appreciate it. So what more can you tell us about Any Way You Can?
The story is called Any Way You Can, and it is a moment where my mom, at 71 years old, and I'm her daughter. I am an analytical internal medicine doctor with too much personality.
Dull.
She gets chronic lymphocytic leukemia 10 years prior. And this is one of those little sneaky cancers that hangs out in your white blood cells, and it'll creep up. And when the doubling rate becomes so fast is when we need to treat it because it's super sneaky. You're going to get more infections. You're going to have trouble fighting off infections. You're going to have an immune system that is kind of like what Brandon's was. It's fragile. And here she was, 71 years old, and we'd already gone through chemo a couple of times. She's probably 50 pounds overweight. And most importantly, she's gone from the Mary Poppins in my life, this energetic woman that can show up in a community event and sprinkle her magic and things happen that I don't even know how to explain to this day.
Yeah.
But here she was, a walking zombie. You could see through her skin. You could feel her death. It was there. And only a month into me being a ketone, because I screwed it up like the first 4 weeks too.
Yeah.
And the cancer's bad, we know, because there's lymph nodes in her neck and her arms that are the size of like a tennis ball. And just before her oncologist walks through the door, she says, if he says cancer, the clothes on the top shelf in my bedroom are the ones I want at the funeral.
Wow.
And just like a movie scene, he walks in. I can't even breathe. It's that quick of a transition. And our fear comes true. And we get the slip to say, go get chemo. And as we're walking from the office to go schedule the chemo, she says, I don't want to do this. And I turn to my mom and say, do you trust me? And she's like, kind of blows me off. Like, of course I trust you. I'm like, no, Mom, do you 100% trust me? And she turns and looks at me and she can feel the intensity of the question. She gets tears in her eyes and says, with my whole life, I trust you. And I said, let me show you what I would do. And that was the beginning, that we were going to fight this any way we could. And in this case, I chose ketosis. And the story is about, for this, study session I'd been on for the months before, I was taking notes, not knowing that this was going to be my mom was going to be my first major student. Talk about, just performance is everything. The 10 years of how do you translate advanced science to meet the audience in front of you? That's what I do a good job of. And this story starts at her little bitty problem of, should we have chemo or should we because she would have been dead in 6 months, her immune system. For the 52 weeks in the previous year, she'd been on antibiotics for 50 of them. She was a mess.
And they only gave you 6 weeks, right?
That's
what you asked for. You said, give me 6 weeks.
I told my mom, give me 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Because I thought I'd screw her up as much as I screwed me up. I had done all kinds of the sauces or the gum or the things that I just didn't think would have carbs in it.
Yeah.
Because until you pay attention, they are everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so we drive to my farmhouse. I write about how important it is to clean up the environment. The story really engages the reader within those first 4 chapters of saying, no.
Yeah.
If you really want to change your life, here are the very clear steps that we did with my mom. And I really think that the place this book has been amazing has been when you have somebody who you know is unhealthy. But if you start saying ketogenic diet to them, it's like punching them in the nose saying, hey, take that bloody nose and do what I tell you to do.
Right.
Never are you going to engage them in a changed behavior. But if you start out saying this 71-year-old woman and her incredibly passionate daughter says, Mom, let me help you. And I went to the farmhouse. We emptied it out. We threw away things. We set up a plan for 6 weeks. We come back at 6 weeks and having made a ton of mistakes, but every time I went to teach her a little lesson, I was taking these notes, which is where the book came from. And I didn't plan on writing a book. My husband nudged me saying, you should turn that into a book. You should turn that into a book. 20 years of marriage. I should start to listen a little sooner. Anyway, we get to the 6 week point and I had no idea. I'd read the Walter Longo, immune systems will shrink if you starve them. Well, we were just ketogenic. We weren't doing fasting. We were just like 100% peeing ketones every day. We weren't checking blood sugars. We weren't doing anything except pee on that stick. It needs to be pink every day. And I really think that's one of the other parts about transitioning somebody who's got an unhealthy life. And then you start throwing all these rules at them, you're going to lose them. You need to start with one simple change. Pee on that stick. Pee on that stick, make it turn pink. Pee on that stick, make it turn pink. And we got to the oncology doctor 6 weeks later, and it had been doubling every 6 weeks. We were hoping that it had only increased by 50%, maybe increased by 25%. I didn't have space in my brain when he said, your numbers are down by 30%. What are you doing? And my mom and I looked at each other and held the
peeing
silence.
on the stick. That's what we're doing. We're peeing on the stick.
Butter power.
Yes. And I was like, don't tell him. Don't tell him. I don't know how to explain all this yet.
Your dad did it with her, right?
As long as Dad got sardines and liverwurst. I mean, we're from South Dakota. That's
and salt. All the things he couldn't eat.
Right. You say this is healthy? I'm not going to argue with you women. He walks out of the room. Perfect.
Great. Well, you're a delight, and it's a wonderful book, and I wholly encourage all of our listeners to go get a copy, get the Audible version, listen to it in your car, or just download it on your Kindle, or, the old-fashioned way with pages and numbers and all of that. It's wonderful. Yeah. And I also would encourage you to give it to people who are curious about how to change their lives with the ketogenic diet. Thank you, Annette.
Thank you, guys. Your show is absolutely part of my curriculum for improving health. I need you to go start at episode 1 and just every day listen to one of their shows. It's absolutely going to change the way you think. So wow. I am a huge fan.
That's great. Well, we're fans of yours now, too. Thank you.
Thanks, Annette.
Yeah, absolutely. Good luck so you're done with exams, so I guess I shouldn't say good luck. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Heard you say you're due for a little.
Yeah, she's a gun, that one, isn't she?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you got to watch out for those convicted felons.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, if you ever wanted a doctor who was able to diagnose you across the room, Annette Bosworth is the one.
Yeah. I just love the fact that, she's into root causes, not just handing out pills. We need all of the doctors in the world to be more like Annette.
Yeah.
Yeah, be like Annette. Well, that interesting conversation got me a little bit hungry.
You're a bit peckish, are you, Carl?
Yeah, a little peckish, and maybe it's time to share some, what do you call them?
Recipes!
Oh, yeah, recipes. Jeez, I almost fell out of my seat. What are you, nuts?
At least you didn't rip your freckle out this time. What you got, Carl?
I got something so easy, it's not even funny.
Mm-hmm.
So I was making the obligatory once-a-month fried fish dinner at my house, which is basically taking big hunks of cod and rolling them up in egg wash and pork panko or panko, breadcrumbs from pork rinds, and deep frying or pan fried. We deep fried them this time. And I had some shrimp too, because I was like, yeah, I could fancy some shrimp. Now, I got this idea for frying the shrimp without batter, but with spice, from, of all places, a local chain steakhouse called Longhorn Steakhouse. They have these wings there that are just coated in herbs and spices. No, mostly spices. I didn't really taste any herbs. But the spice mixture and the salt sort of coats it and makes this little crispy outer shell that when, you eat it, it's kind of nice.
Nice.
A lot like, if it was dusted in flour, except there's little to no carbs in there. And I looked on their website to see, yes, indeed, they list those wings, one serving as 0 carbs. So, I remember I had some Old Bay seasoning in the cabinet, and Old Bay it's like the taste of Maryland crab cakes.
Yeah, it's a Maryland specialty, isn't it? So.
Yeah, and they sell it in seafood stores all over, up and down the East Coast, and probably out west too, and anywhere else in America. But celery salt seems to be the dominant flavor. But
we don't get it in Australia. At least I don't think we get it from any spices. But I understand apparently that Master Foods do make an Old Bay spice, so that should be possible to get.
So you got celery salt, cayenne pepper, a little paprika. If you wanted to do something that estimates it, maybe a little garlic and onion powder. The typical stuff. I don't taste any cumin in there, but celery salt does seem to be the dominant flavor. So anyway, all I did was I took the shrimp, dusted in Old Bay, and dropped them in the fryer. And this is lard we're talking about. And man, those are just for maybe 30 seconds.
Yeah, nice.
And they're just so tasty and spicy. Interestingly, and I'll get a recipe together for this, but it was almost embarrassing at how much I called in the sauce. So I had gotten this vitamin supplement for my wife, who hates taking pills but needed to up her nutrients. And so we got this tropical fruit flavored, sugar-free vitamin solution that didn't have any iron, and that was really important because I guess iron, when you take it with other vitamins, tends to not work as well. So I guess the idea, or the conventional wisdom is that you take iron after you take your other vitamins an hour after or so, and then it'll absorb better. Anyway, this stuff has a funky tropical fruit, juicy taste to it, and it's sugar-free.
Like juicy fruits.
Juicy.
Yeah, juicy fruit taste.
Yeah, so basically what I did is I took some water and allulose in equal parts, and I took some sambal olek, which is chili paste. It's hot.
Yeah.
Spicy.
Yeah.
Put that in there along with a dash of this tropical fruit vitamin solution. And I'm sorry I don't have the brand, but I'll put a name. I know, it's crazy.
It sounds disgusting.
It does sound disgusting. However, when you realize that every, Thai restaurant in the world comes with some sugary chili sauce that has a tropical fruit flavor, it actually works. So I thickened it with a little xanthan gum, and of course that made it set up and turn into like a little jelly. And yeah, it was great. And,
nice.
And here's the thing, though. It did not mix with Old Bay. No. However, they would be good with coconut shrimp, I think.
Okay, fair enough. Nice.
So anyway, the last part, that sauce is an aside. My real recipe is put some shrimp in Old Bay and fry it, eat it, yum.
And you get a nice coating on the outside of it.
Nice crispy coating. What you got, man?
So my recipe is actually what I had for dinner the night before last. It was actually the night of my last exam. And of course, this is the kind of meal that you cook when it's whiskey o'clock.
Scotch o'clock.
Scotch o'clock, yeah. I mean, I'd been 6 months in the development of this semester, right. And I just finished the last exam. And so I started in on the whiskey, and then I had some steak, I had some ribeye in bags in the fridge for sous vide.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, sous vide beef is just so easy.
So good, too.
Yeah. So what I do with this is I put it in a vacuum bag. I put a little bit of olive oil on it first and a little bit of salt. Put it in the bag. Normally I'd add maybe thyme, but because, of course, I'm carnivore this November this month. So I'm only using salt and meat and water pretty much. Oh, and eggs and dairy a little bit as well.
Right.
So anyway, in a vacuum sucked bag, I've got a perfect ribeye. It's an Angus beef ribeye, and it's absolutely delicious. And so what I do is I put it in the sous vide. I use an Innova sous vide stick, and I throw it on at 51 Celsius for about an hour. If you go into the Innova app and you just say, look, I want to cook a steak, the steak is ribeye and I want it medium rare to rare, then it will set it up for you exactly 51.1 degrees and an hour. Okay, so here's the thing. I wanted to do surf and turf. Surf and turf, of course, is traditionally steak and lobster, or you can have prawns, shrimp if you want.
Meat and seafood.
Meat and seafood, yeah. So I thought I've got some shrimp in my freezer. I'm going to go get some shrimp. I'm going to pull them out. I'm going to throw them in a Ziploc bag, and I'm going to put them into the hot water, and it'll be delicious, and I'll have surf and turf. And I went to my freezer, and my freezer wasn't on.
Oh.
And it hadn't been on for 4 weeks.
Oh.
And it smelt like a corpse.
Oh. I know that smell.
Yeah.
I had bad electricity in my house, too.
Yeah. So somebody actually accidentally unplugged it about 4 weeks ago. So anyway, there's a whole bunch of inedible food, including the shrimp that I was going to use for my surf and turf.
Crikey!
Okay, so now my steak that's going on the sous vide for an hour has been in there for 10 minutes. And so I get on my bike and I ride to the shopping centre because I am just craving surf and turf.
Right.
Once I've got this idea in my head, I'm determined to see it through. And of course, I was already one finger into the whiskey. So,
oh, no.
so I was really committed.
Wait a minute. Are you a convicted felon now?
No, I managed to get away. They can't catch me that easily. So I rode to the shop intending to buy some shrimp. They had some shrimp, but it was really nasty looking, and I thought, it looked sort of mushy.
Yep.
And you
away.
don't want shrimp that's mushy. Stay away from that. But right next to the shrimp, they had some rock lobster tails, which were absolutely lovely looking little rock. Just the tail chopped off of the rock lobster.
Yeah.
They're not very long. They're about maybe 4 inches long. And they're a delicacy in Australia. So anyway, I bought 2 of these rock lobster tails, got back on my bike, and by the time I got home, there was sort of 10 minutes left to go in the steak before the steak was finished cooking. And so I quickly looked up, and it turns out that the ideal temperature to cook lobster for is 54 Celsius. Okay, so my steak was on at 51 Celsius, so all I was going to do was pull the steak out, crank up the temperature to 54, throw the lobster in, and Bob's your
uncle.
Bob's your auntie's living lover. So anyway, the problem here, though, is that they're in the shell. And, of course, lobster in the shell is very difficult to get out.
Right.
So the first thing that you want to do is you want to get a chopstick, and you want to stick the chopstick down the back of the lobster, right to the tail. And what that's going to do is it's going to force the tail to not curl up. Okay,
right.
So it keeps the tail straight.
Yeah. And
then you put some boiling water on, and you're going to blanch the lobster tail in boiling water for a minute, no longer.
All right.
And I used the chopsticks. I had these chopsticks with lobster stuck on the end, like a lobster lollipop.
Yeah.
And I dipped these things in the boiling water for a minute, and then I pulled them out and put them in water with ice blocks in it, so that I was chilling them down again. And now, of course, a pair of kitchen shears, you can easily get the shells off. So,
nice. Nice tip.
So the tails came out perfectly. So I put them into a Ziploc bag, and I put about 50 grams of butter into the Ziploc, salted butter, into the Ziploc bag, cranked up the sous vide, pulled the steak out, so I was going to start searing the steak, and dropped the lobster into the sous vide, into the water. Now, I had this lobster shell, and I thought, it's a shame to throw that away because lobster shell has so much flavour in it.
Right.
What you have to do is you have to fry it. You have to roast it and fry it in oil.
That's right, and that releases all the flavors, and you can use that as stock.
So what I did was I put 50 grams more of butter in a small little pan and I fried up those lobster shells.
So you got lobster butter.
I got lobster butter, and it's like it is like orange and just total essence of lobster. So I had the lobster sitting in the sous vide pot of water, and it was, as I said, it was in a Ziploc bag. So the Ziploc was right at the top surface of the water. So what I did was I snuck the Ziploc open just a little bit and poured all of this lobster butter in into the Ziploc, and it's basically the lobster was in there for 15 minutes. Stewing in its own juices and a little bit of butter. And so then I seared my steak. That's just a sort of a minute each side on a very hot pan, and sliced the steak up so that you could see that it was medium rare.
Yep.
And you'll see the photo on my Facebook.
I saw it. It was amazing.
But that little lobster tail that was poached in its own juices.
At about 130 Fahrenheit, you said. 54 Celsius?
54 Celsius, about 130 Fahrenheit for about 15 minutes. That's all it takes.
Just
in a little Ziploc bag, a little bit of butter, and if you want to torture it properly by putting it in its own juices.
And come to think of it, any seafood, shrimp, mussels, scallops, lobster tail, crab would all be really nice at 54 Celsius with butter in a sous vide bag. Come to think of it,
Yeah. Yeah, I've got some ideas. I'm going to get some crab, I think.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my recipe.
Sorry, I was daydreaming there. Well, I guess that's a show, Richard.
Of course, if you have anything you want to tell us, something we said wrong, something you don't agree with, some more research you found to support or refute, anything that we've said, send it by email to dudes@2ketodudes.com or post it on our website.
And you can follow us on Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram at 2ketodudes. Make sure to use the hashtag 2ketodudes.
And of course, if you want to join the free ketogenic forum, it's forum.2keto.com. And you can have a look around at the ketogenic forum without needing to create an account by starting with success.2keto.com.
And if useless swag is your fancy, like t-shirts, coffee mugs, and all that other junk, head on over to gear.2keto.com.
And if you want a shot at getting some of that swag for free, join the 2 Keto Dudes fan club. You'll be eligible to win something in every show. Go to fanclub.2keto.com.
And if you feel like supporting our forums and all the podcasts we produce, think about making a monthly pledge on our Patreon page at patreon.2keto.com.
You can also see all of our podcasts and other videos on YouTube at youtube.2keto.com.
And if you haven't already, go leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That's how new people get to know about what we do. 2 Keto Dudes is brought to you by 2 Keto LLC, who strives to support the low-carb community with podcasts and other publications. And keep calm and keto on.
Yeah, keep calm, keto on, Carl.
All right, we'll see you next time
on 2 Keto Dudes.